Right. The opening. Steven Spielberg once said that the most important shot in any film that he's ever made is the very, very first one. And of course, he's absolutely right. And it's the same today. It's the same, particularly the same, with platforms like YouTube, the modern era, where it's very, very easy to go from one video to the next, just skip across like this, back and forward, back and forward, back and very, very easy to find stuff to watch. So that's why the beginning is so important. But I'd like to add one more thing to what Steven Spielberg said, and that is said the first sound effect, what you hear, is every bit as important as what you see. So I've got a couple of examples here where I'm going to show you where I felt that in some programs that I have made, the opening was particularly good. What you want to do with your opening frame is to say to your audience, this is where we are, this is what we're about, and then to get them to ask a mental question. I'm going to show you now what I mean.
Andrew, you gotta come over here. How many monkeys got in your tent?
Monkeys got in my tent. All right. In this particular situation, this was episode 8 of an 11-part series about traveling through Africa. The probably 95% of the people watching episode 8 would have watched the other episodes too, but not all. So I've got to consider that. Even those that have seen the program before, I need to tell them and remind them what it's all about. So I open with 2 very, very nice shots. They're very attractive shots. They're very beautiful shots. They have a certain aesthetic appeal. But more importantly, I put in a good sound effect. Now here, the sound effect of a hippopotamus.
Andrew, you gotta come over here.
Now I want you to think of sound effects as shots. Mentally, think of sound effects as, if you've got a vista, for example, you've got a beach scene, waves crashing over rocks, birds calling, wind in the grass. That's a wide shot. You've got lots of ambience. Lovely, very important to filmmaking. Equivalent of a wide shot with the cliffs and the hills and the beach, and there are the waves and all of the bits that make up this wide shot. It's the equivalent of a wide shot. Now you have the sound effect of the seagull itself. Very prominent, very clear. It's the seagull. In this case, of course, it's the hippopotamus. These sound effects, no matter what they are like a telephoto lens. It's like zooming in on something and only having that particular object in the frame. The equivalent of having just one object in the frame, so your audience just focuses on a single object, not lots of objects, but just one object or one thing in the frame. The equivalent of that in sound effects is the sound of that specific thing. In this particular case, it's a hippopotamus. So what have I done in my first 11 seconds of this video? I have said to my audience, beautiful place. 2 shots. Beautiful place near a river. There are wild animals about. How do I know that? I haven't shown them, but you can hear them. So beautiful place. Really gorgeous sun, looks like a sunrise. Could even be a sunset, not important. At this point, there are wild animals around because I can hear the hippo. Then somebody calls out and says, hey, the monkeys got in your tent. So the words, hey, the monkeys got in your tent, is now getting your audience to ask a question. They know where you are. They know the wild animals about. One of them got in your tent. How did they get in the tent? Did they damage anything? Now they're asking questions. They're asking mental questions. If you can get your audience to ask a mental question in the first few seconds, then you're doing well. To help with that, before I find other examples, you don't need to be linear. What I mean by linear is this happens, and then that happened, and then that happened, and then that happened, and then that happened in a true sense time form. We understand, as humans, we understand time. We are very aware of time. It does not need to be explained to us. So, if you start your video with the end result, then maybe your audience will say, how did that happen? What do you mean that it fell, it broke, it burnt, it crashed, it whatever, okay? You got sick, or whatever. Doesn't matter what it is. Even if at the end of the story that happened, having it right up front can, as long as it's not a spoiler, can get your audience to ask a question. Why, how did that, why are they, what, do you understand what I'm saying? They mentally ask a question. The moment your audience mentally asks a question, you've got them. Because they're interested in the answer. And they'll stick around until the answer is given to them. So sometimes what happens later on in the video, or even later on in the story, bring it up right up front, is really cool. But to do that and not spoil the story, you have to be sensitive to how much information you give them right up front. You give them a smell, a hint, a whiff of what happened. And then you pull back and you start telling the story. And that's what I've done here. I'm going to find a few more examples of that same thing.
Much to cross. It's 151, 150. Yes.
I'm in Africa, in Botswana, crossing the Boteti River, on an adventure to find close animal encounters in Africa. Welcome to part 3. All right, immediately, what I've done there is I have set it up with a wide general shot. I've got a general ambience. It's quite a quirky ambience, a little bit unusual. There's a bit of music playing in the background. It's very real. You get a nice sense, okay? Quite early on, I have a discussion between two people. It's a bridge. How much to cross the bridge? Okay, I now have set up a question in the viewer's mind. Why are you crossing the bridge? What are you doing crossing? Why do you need to cross that bridge? Where are you going? Looks interesting. I've set up a lot of interest here. Not intrigue, but interest. Okay? And I've got 3 shots, interesting perspectives of the vehicle crossing the bridge. If I had to run the entire crossing the bridge, it would take probably 1 minute, because we came across, we stopped, he said something to us that wasn't really through the windscreen. I filmed it, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. He then stepped off and then said something, and I didn't film the whole thing, because if I had, it would have been boring. It just would have been uninteresting. I've put in here the interesting bits, the getting on, crossing the Boteti River. And during the gaps where it's just simply a vehicle moving and nothing else is happening, I put in narrative, my narration explaining what's going on over the potentially less interesting parts of. Editing is always driven by the soundtrack. Always. And I will explain more of that later. But this is actually driven by the soundtrack, by what's going on. Like the previous one, it's driven by the soundtrack. You hear the hippos, and then you hear a voice saying, hey, your monkey's gone into your tent. The audio is driving everything. The audio is dictating the pace and informing and giving the information that the audience wants.
Okay.
Beautiful shot of a hippopotamus. What is that saying to my audience? I'm still in Africa, particularly those who know the show. I'm in Africa. Even those never seen the show before, first shot, I'm in Africa, and it's a good one. Beautiful, clear shot. There's a beautiful hippopotamus.
Okay, exciting things happening. Now,
Me saying, oh, okay, there's exciting things happening. So what does that do to your audience? Somebody coming up and saying, oh, there's an exciting thing happening, is immediately saying to your audience, there's an exciting thing happening. It's an invitation to stick around.
Letsuma Dam, we went there yesterday and photographed the elephants. There might be an opportunity for us to camp there. That means that we can actually be right next to that waterhole right through the night.
I'm explaining the situation, but I'm explaining it over a really strong shot of an elephant. Because I'm saying in the narrative that there's interesting stuff happening. But I've also kept it simple. If you have a narrative explaining something, so in other words, the voice is explaining the story, beware of cluttering it with complicated images, because the mind, unless the voice narrative, it directly relates to the image, directly relates. Talking about an apple, seeing an apple. Talking about the sky, seeing the sky, directly relates. If it doesn't directly relate, and it relates in a broad sense like this, which is talking about going to a place and looking at animals. We're not specifically talking about the texture of an elephant's trunk. Okay, I'm keeping one or two shots, keeping them simple, keeping the pace normal. So I'm actually more interested in my audience listening to the narrative than I am in them watching the elephant. I've got some great elephant shots later, which are far better than this, where the story is the elephant. I kept the best shots of the elephant for the elephant bit of the story. Here, I'm more interested in my audience listening to what I have to say, because the narrative, what I'm narrating, is important for them to understand the story.
The night. You're going to find out now if there is a space available.
It's day 24 of an expedition in search of close encounters with Africa's wild animals. And we're hoping today to do something really special. So, I've now gone back a bit, reminding my audience what the series is all about. And for those people who have never seen the series before, what the series is all about. And then I go straight out, and that is less than 30 seconds. Do it quickly. Get it done. Get on with the story. Don't hang about. Okay. Then I've got back into me reiterating, reconfirming the promise to the viewer that something cool's happening. Remind them right away. You've already said something cool's happening. We're waiting for this. Oh, it's like excitement. Quick intro. 30 seconds, quick intro. Remind them why they're still watching. Keep them hyped up. And what I did is I said this. We might get lucky. We might get lucky. Isn't that asking, getting the audience to ask, lucky? Okay, what do you want to get lucky about? Yeah, I hope you get lucky because it looks interesting. You know, they now have a vested interest in the story. That's what you've got to try and do with your openings. You've got to pour in so much effort into your openings. Lastly, when it comes to openings, I would say 90% of the time, I edit my opening last. I'll put a few shots in, I'll have a few ideas, I'll chuck a few shots in, and I won't spend a lot of time in the opening. And I will get the body of the story going. I'll just lay down the body of the story. So it's rolling, it's got a nice, and we're going to talk about that now, nice body of the story, nice pace, interesting, keeping your audience involved and keeping them entertained and keeping them fed. Then I'll go back because I'll kind of understand mentally how the story is going, because I've already edited it. Also, and here is where the non-linear thing is so important. If you do it that way, you'll know that halfway through the story, 3/4 of the way through the story, oh yeah, this happened. That was really cool. It'll remind you, and then you can say, you know something, I should take a little piece of that and chuck it in the beginning. So I really think it's a great idea not to begin at the beginning. End at the beginning. Once you've got the basic structure of your video down, your story down, go back and you'll have a far easier time of the editing than just simply starting at the beginning. And as I said before, I very rarely do that because it's hard. This way makes the opening easier to do and much better in the long run.
The Canning Stock Route is one of the world's longest and most remote public tracks. Totaling 1,700 kilometers, a little over 1,000 miles, it's the longest cattle stock route ever surveyed. It was just 87 years ago that the last cattle drive was undertaken along Alfred Canning's stock route, and only 45 years ago that the first four-wheel drive explorers attempted to retrace the route. Today it's as remote as it ever was, and while it is no doubt less rough and demanding, it is described in Hemmer's Great Desert Trails book like this. No track compares with a Canning stock route in terms of sheer distance and mechanical and physical endurance required. It is Australia's toughest four-wheel drive trek. It is thanks to the tireless efforts of individuals that not only keeps this trail open to explorers like us, but makes it possible by restoring the wells and the water they provide.
Tastes good. Tastes very nice, actually.
I invite you now to join us on our 22-day expedition on the world's longest public track.
This is an example of an opening to an entire series. I'm inviting the audience to take part, come with me and travel on a multiple series. Not just inviting them to watch the video that I'm about to present them, to actually watch the series of videos that I've put together. And what I've done is that I've combined, I needed to come up with something very impactful right away. Very careful with my choice of music. We will do music choices later in the course. Very important. Finding an impactful piece of music, find a very impactful shot or series of shots, and then combine it with narrative that explains the motivation for the trip. Why are we doing it? What is the plan? And what is the goal? Very important. What is the goal? Your audience will then hopefully, see that as, that is a worthwhile goal. I'd like to follow that. Give them a taste of what to come. Choose your best moments from your entire shoot. This is where to put them in. And remember, vitally, the soundtrack the audio is every bit as important as the video content. So right now, it's a very dramatic shot to begin with.
Totaling 1,700 kilometers, a little over 1,000 miles, it's the longest cattle stock route ever surveyed. It was just 87 years ago that the last
A little bit of history. Give it relevance.
cattle drive was undertaken along Alfred Canning's stock route.
What is very important here is to not give too much information. You're giving a taste, you're giving a whiff, you're just getting a smell of what's to come. This isn't the place to give a lot of information. This is the place to tease. Very important to remember that.
And only 45 years ago that the first four-wheel drive explorers attempted to retrace the route. Today it's as remote as it ever was, and while it is no doubt less rough and demanding, it is described in Hemmer's Great Desert Trails book like this. No track compares with a Canning stock route in terms of sheer distance and mechanical and physical endurance required. It is Australia's toughest four-wheel drive trek.
The purpose of actually getting in the opinion of another about what we're doing, in this case it was a magazine, isn't that a good idea? It just gives another endorsement, a second endorsement that what you are doing and what you're attempting to do is worthwhile and what you say or claim it is.
It is thanks to the tireless efforts of individuals that not only keeps this trail open to explorers like us, but makes it possible by restoring the wells and the water they provide.
That's good. A little snippet, just a little grab. I grabbed a frame, a moment on the trail. That says something about the trail. Okay, not just a moment, but a moment that says something about the trail that is a little bit unusual. Oh, that's interesting. I'm giving a little piece of information. And in this particular case, I'm drinking water straight out of the well. That is saying to the audience, and let's be analytical about this. It's saying to the audience, there are wells. They might not know that, but there are wells. They've got water in them. The water is drinkable. That's quite unusual. So it's a little snippet of what's to come, a promise of better things to come.
That's very nice, actually.
I invite you now to join us on our 22-day expedition on the world's longest public track.
A direct invitation, and then you get into the story. Don't hang about. More to come later.